Good morning and welcome to Thursday's morning devotional. I know it is 11:40. I was having a little bit of technical difficulties, but thank you for being patient this morning. We're just going to jump right on in. In my quiet time this morning, I've been reading through a devotional by Dennis Swanberg, and today's message just really touched me. It was really beneficial because God has created us to do a lot of great things, but God has also given us the ability to endure the fire. And Dennis Swanberg's devotional this morning just really reminded me what we are to do to endure the fire. And so I just want to read the devotional this morning by Dennis Swanberg. The Old Testament prophet Daniel wrote the most curious firefighting story ever, found in Daniel chapter 3, verses 19 through 30. See, Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had been robbed of their godly Hebrew names, given those three ugly Babylonian names, and it would be like renaming Bubba Jones after a Ninja Turtle. Nebuchadnezzar tried to cancel their very identities. So we know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were taken captive by Babylon and brought into a whole new world to pretty much to follow and comply to what Babylonian way was. In fact, it went on. Dennis Swanberg went on to talk about Nebuchadnezzar tries to cancel their very identities. In fact, the world does that to believers today. When the three lads refused to bow down to an idol that looked like Nebuchadnezzar, he went ballistic. He heated up the incinerator 7 times hotter than it had ever been. Of course, we're familiar with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the story of the fiery furnace. He tied up the trio and had them thrown into the fiery furnace. The guys who threw them in were even burned up. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were supposed to be toast. But then they were not. When Nebuchadnezzar investigated his personal oven, he saw that the three boys were not only unbound, but walking around like they were on a beach in Florida or Mexico, taking in the sun. But that's not all he saw. He saw a fourth man in the furnace. That man looked like God. In fact, there are many people who thought that the fourth man in the furnace was a cameo appearance of Jesus himself. You see, rugged old Peter wrote early Christians about the fire. In fact, he wrote this letter in 1 Peter chapter 4. He said he urged them not to be surprised at fiery trials as they were something strange. Dennis Swanberg went on to say, much of the Christian life is lived in the fire. Jesus endured the worst fire of all, the cross. Paul spent 7 years in jail and was then beheaded. James was thrown into jail and then executed. In fact, tradition tells us that all 12 disciples, except for John, was martyred. But John himself didn't just escape scotch-free. He spent his last days as an old prisoner in the tiny island of Patmos after he was dumped into a hot boiling oil. You see, the first 300 years of the Christian faith witnessed great waves of persecution by Rome. Trials came in like the tide and carried Christians out of the sea of eternity by the boatload. Martin Luther spent his adult life kicked out of the Roman Church and banned by the empire. Calvin was run out of Geneva. John Knox was chained to the oars of a galley slave, just like Charleston Heston and Ben-Hur. Bonhoeffer was executed on April 9th, 1945, just a few days before the Allies would have liberated him. More Christians have died for the faith in the 20th century than any century since ancient times. Swanberg goes on to write, yet you and I think that we are in the fire if someone at work makes a joke about us believing in Jesus. A snarky coworker jokes that you talk to an invisible friend named Jesus, like Jimmy Stewart talked to the invisible rabbit and Harvey. A godless cousin snipes at you at Thanksgiving dinner, reminding you of fallen preachers and Christian fakes. A partisan person mocks your faith in the midst of politics or a pandemic. The guys on a business trip mock you because you will not go to a strip joint. You see, these are just little flames compared to the big fire of Christian history. The harder fires of those of betrayal in your own home, devastating diagnosis, and runaway kids. But see, God never guaranteed that you would not face flames. In fact, Jesus very clearly stated in John chapter 16, in this world you will face tribulations. He flat out promised it. But you will live in a fire much of the time. You see, here's the deal this morning. Jesus promised that you will walk through the fire. He never promised that He will save you out of the fire. But He did promise that He will walk with you through it. You will never find Him closer than when you are in the fire. So church, I don't know about your life. I don't know if there's just a lot of things going on in your life right now to where you just feel like you are going through a bad storm, you're going through a fire, and you just need to call on Jesus. I don't know, maybe for you at work, you're getting persecuted, you are getting mocked, you're getting told that you can't take Sundays off because how dare you take off for church. I don't know about you, but maybe your kids are getting bullied at school because they're trying to pray before every meal. They're trying to do right by the Lord and what the Lord says is right and wrong, and people are telling them that they are wrong. I don't know. But what I do know is that every day that passes, the fire will grow hotter. With every day that passes, this world will grow darker. And that is why we as believers need to continue on through the fire. We need to look at one another, grab arm in arm, hand in hand, be strengthened by one another, but more importantly than that, we can remember that the Lord walks through the fire with us. In fact, Dennis Swanberg went on to talk about this. I want you to think about Job for a minute. You see, a man so righteous like Job, God bragged on. And Job lost his stuff, his kids, and his own health. In the middle of all that, surrounded by friends who told him that it was all his own fault. They threw gas on the fire time and time again. Not literal, but telling Job it was his own fault. Yet at the end of the story of Job, it is God who stands with him in the fire. You see, there is no solution other than the presence of God and His final blessing on Job at the end of that fire. So church, this morning, I want to encourage you. When there seems like no solution through the fire that you're walking in, when it seems like no solution through the troubled times that you're having to deal with, God is the solution. Because there is no solution